Ghost of Tsushima was released July 17th, 2020, a couple days behind the scheduled release of The Last of Us Part 2, and with that caused some controversy on what game is considered to be the best out of the two. And as we have seen in the Game Awards, The Last of Us Part 2 ended up winning Game of the Year, some arguing that it was stolen from Ghost of Tsushima. And in this video, I want to put the argument to the test and see if Ghost of Tsushima really is a masterpiece as everyone says it is. And when this game released, I played it for a couple of hours, but because of The Last of Us Part 2 released, I ended up playing that instead. And when it came time to come back to Ghost of Tsushima, my PS4 Slim died on me. So with that release of the director's cut for PS5, I thought it was a great time to jump in. And with that being said, get some popcorn and drinks, follow the Twitch in the description below for some entertaining discussions, sit back and relax, and let's see if Ghost of Tsushima was really a masterpiece. To kick off the story section, we get to witness the start of the Mongolian invasion right off the bat. I need to take a second and say that I love this opening. It gets you right into the action, no exposition bullshit that takes about 2 hours of the game, and I praise this kind of thing with God of War critique. It gets the player engaged quickly and has their adrenaline pumping. There is a voice monologue by the main protagonist, Jin, which does give some exposition, but not to the point where it becomes overbearing, but really only states the details of the Mongols and samurai, saying that there's only 80 samurai against an entire army, setting an insurmountable odds type of game when it comes to the plot. Seems great so far. An important thing to point out though is the fact that Jin states that he's going to die, insinuating that he knows that the samurai are going to lose. This is going to come into play heavy towards the middle/end of the game. And shortly after, Lord Shimura, the leader of the samurai on Tsushima Island, orders another samurai to go down to where the Mongols are and challenge their best fighters. When he does go down there, he does this sort of speech telling the Mongol who he is and such. We then see how the Mongols are. They fight dirty, aren't honorable, and are downright brutal. Contrasting with the samurai, the Mongol leader throws wine at the dude and throws a torch, setting him on fire, burning him alive. This freaks out the samurai, understandably considering they aren't used to fighting enemies like this. Regardless, Lord Shimura tells us to charge and this huge cinematic thing happens, which is pretty darn cool. I was having some fun being on the horse and just slaughtering fools on horseback. I will say though that the controls for horseback combat is pretty janky. You'll find yourself either whiffing the enemy entirely or getting sucked in like a magnet to kill said enemies. It's really weird, but at the end of the day, I was still having fun in this segment, so it really doesn't matter. After the horseback riding, we got taken down and must fight on foot. This part isn't interesting at all, honestly, considering you have none of your abilities, stances, and gear. This is just a tutorial thing. The funny thing is, though, that I never got a pop-up that actually gives a tutorial. I haven't played this game in like 2 years, and I needed help. It would have been great to see the pop-up instead of trying to hit every button to see what it does. But eventually, Lord Shimura tells us that we're the only samurai left on the island along with him. With just the two of us walking up the hill, the problem is, they never really show the damage that has been done besides showing the dead bodies on the beach. Like, yeah, sure, it works, but I want to see the damage done to the samurai. You just see bodies, like I've said before, and it's hard to distinguish which is samurai and which is Mongol. This is a very minor nitpick, but still, I think a small cutscene detailing this would have gone a long way to show what the Mongols are capable of, since they fight with no honor. Maybe show a pile of samurai bodies burning next to Jin? I mean, I have no idea. We then see Jin and Shimura charge against the Mongol leader on foot, just the two of them, but you see a ball of fire hit Jin and he becomes unconscious. So I have a problem with this right off the bat. It is so fucking anticlimactic. Like, we don't even get to see Lord Shimura get his ass handed to him. It just fades to black. Keep in mind, we only get to see the brutality of the Khan during the beginning of the game and towards the end. And that brutality isn't even fighting people. It's either torture, dirty fighting with no weapons, and that's it. I only saw him fight us in the entire game. So you force the player to believe he is this badass villain but never see him annihilate anyone. Having that here would have been perfect, but no, they decided to just fade to black. And I'm not sure if this was the writing or they didn't want to script out a sequence where we see the two fight. Once again, this is a very little nitpick, but still. And after we see this dramatic thing where Jin is looking at Shimura getting captured, Jin then sees a sword and tries to get up and grab it, but is stopped because an arrow flies into his back, causing another blackout. Bruh, it was literally 2 seconds from the previous blackout, and we need another one? It makes no sense. The Khan then starts strolling out and talks to Shimura. The Khan tells him that he has learned their language, decided which towns to burn and which to keep, and so forth, trying to scare Shimura into submitting, to surrender. When asked this, Shimura keeps quiet, indicating that he won't back down to the Khan. Then again, another blackout moment. How many times are characters going to black out in this game? There had already been 3 within the first 15 minutes of the game. It just feels like a cheap way to transition into the next scene. Not to mention, why didn't the Khan just kill Shimura? He already explained that he learned the language, where the towns are, the traditions, and so forth. There was absolutely no use in keeping Shimura alive here. The writing is off to a bad start. After the poor transition, we have the option of pressing the X button, which causes Jin to wake up. I honestly wonder what happens when you don't press X. Does he just like die? I have no idea. We then see Jin lying down in an unknown area with bandages around him and his armor off. This sparks a mission to figure out who healed you and where to find your sword and armor. When we eventually do find our armor, we get to finally see the horror the Mongols are inflicting on people. A woman comes in and tells us that we need to go back inside. She then asks us a bunch of questions that consist of, can you run? Are you okay? And so forth. At this point, we now understand that she's the one that healed us. Jin then asks where our sword is, and she replies that his sword isn't with his armor, initiating another scripted stealth section so we can find it. It's not a big deal. Shortly after, a Mongol comes in and Jin must hide. We get to see the woman in action as she fakes being scared when the Mongol is stealing her rice. The woman kills the Mongol all stealth-like, which surprises Jin afterwards. She tells us to follow her in order to get our sword. Along the way, there's this weird conversation in the middle of trying to sneak through a village. Jin tells the woman that his uncle is Shimura, and this surprises the woman. Jin quickly asks if he's alive and if he's okay, where is he, and so forth. And I guess she saw where they took him. It's an odd coincidence. And she says that along the coast to a place called Castle Kaneda, which he probably resides in. And I really hope this game doesn't run off coincidences to further the plot. Whenever games do this, it just brings the narrative down so fast. It makes it so the plot points aren't believable. Further into the conversation though, Jin states that he needs to save Shimura in order to have him call reinforcements from the Shogun. A noble and dangerous thing to do, but Yuna, the woman, states that she didn't nurse us back to health to throw our life away. Although this makes sense from a Good Samaritan point of view, the reason she saved us was to save her brother, as she states later on. This is a problem. You're meaning to tell me that she randomly was strolling on the beach that is full of dead people, found that we were alive somehow, and nursed us back to health for the sole purpose of saving her brother. Like I said, this game is starting to run on coincidences. There's no way in hell I believe she just did all of this to save her brother. And if I were her, wouldn't you just hire someone to help? Like a straw hat, instead of taking a huge chance and trying to find someone alive on that beach? When we get our sword, a flashback hits to where Jin was a kid. This whole cringe sequence plays of him using a sword. I don't know, I just found this funny.
I am Jin Sakai, nephew to the great Lord Shimura. And I am no coward!
Anyways, this whole sequence is pretty much a combat tutorial that I wish we had at the beginning of the game. Your normal light, heavy stab attacks, as well as your parry, block, and dodge. Everything is pretty simple, which I like a lot. Having something overly complicated would have been like, ew. I will get more into depth with the combat in the designated combat section of the video though. The narrative stuff in this section though plants the seeds of either fighting with honor or fighting coward-like, or in other words, like the ghost. Shimura tells Jin that in order to fight, he needs to first control his emotions. Though later on you will see that those emotions will catch up to him. One thing to note though, there are these little parts of the game where you can choose a dialogue option, and all honesty, they are not important at all. And when I first started playing this game, I thought that whichever dialogue option you have picked would either lead you down a path of honor or path of the ghost, which will then in turn change the narrative depending on your choices. But everything is the same regardless of what you pick. What a shame. If that's the case, why even put these here? It doesn't change the engagement of the player at all. It just makes me think that they had other plans for how this game would play, but ultimately decided that it should be a linear story without any choice. It's just really odd. After the combat tutorial dream sequence, there is this badass cutscene of Jin unsheathing his katana, and afterwards we just absolutely fuck this dude up. Yuna then tells us that there is a stable just up ahead, but there are guards that are nearby that are being assholes to some civilians. Yuna is a type of rogue character. She's this silent and deadly person that teaches Jin throughout the game the ways of the ghost. So when we get to these guards, she comes up with a plan to sneak behind them and take them out that way. Jin, on the other hand, is a samurai all about honor, which means that he'll attack head on, in which we do so. And afterwards, when we save the civilian, he tells Jin that a place called the Golden Temple would be a good place for him to go. The fucking weird thing is that Yuna is surprised that Jin risked his life for the person. Yeah, isn't that what samurai do. You'll come to find out throughout the game that Yuna's writing is so on the nose and or bad all the time. She will state the obvious, will say the word ghost in almost every sentence toward the middle of the game, and will nonstop talk about her brother before you save him. Literally almost every time you have a quest with her. Easily like the most annoying character in the game. After some fighting and talking with Yuna, Jin makes his way towards Castle Kanado where Shimura is being held hostage. Once he gets to that main bridge, a standoff happens where we take down a bunch of Mongol men, and afterwards Jin calls out to the Khan to face him. A scripted boss fight begins where Jin just gets his ass whipped over and over again, and trust me, I tried to cheese this boss battle by reloading saves and shit, and you just can't. His health barely goes down, and don't get me wrong, I don't mind scripted boss battles, but wouldn't it be cool if you can get a secret ending by actually taking down the Khan then and there? One can only wish. The Khan, after taking us down, literally shoves Jin off a bridge after he slices his face, which then causes another blackout. I mean, he fell off a bridge. I mean, I'd imagine he blacked out, but it was a fade to black. And we go through a flashback sequence. And I'm not even going to comment on these like blackouts anymore, whatever it is, transitions. It's just annoying. It happened in the first 30 minutes of the game or to an hour. In this flashback, we see Jin as a kid witnessing his father's death. It is some heavy stuff, but at the same time, I never felt any emotion towards the scene. I'm not sure if we're supposed to or not, but I feel like I should mention it. After that sequence, still in the flashback, we play as child Jin walking towards his father's funeral pyre. We walk with Yuriko, which is like our grandmother. I'm not sure what she is. She tells Jin that his father is the wind and his mother's the birds and the trees. And I like this statement because they're gameplay mechanics. In the game, you see the wind as navigation instead of a mini-map, and birds guide you towards certain treasures, gameplay enhancements, and so forth on the island. I just thought it was cool. When we get to the pyre, we talk with Shimura. Jin essentially feels guilt for his father's death. His father called out to him before he died, but Jin hid instead, not wanting to get involved. Some heavy stuff. Shimura's point of view isn't necessarily sadness, though. He states that his father gets the reward of a warrior's death for protecting his son, that his father is in a better place. I know that this is a samurai game, but it just seems like Shimura's only personality trait is being samurai. Don't get me wrong, it makes perfect sense. But when it comes to narrative storytelling, you need to have more. We eventually get that later in the game, kind of, but in the beginning, he's very one note. After Shimura's comforting words, he gives Jin his father's blade. He also tells Jin that he wants him to be his ward, a sort of welcome to the family thing. Seems legit. Right after, we snap out of the flashback with Jin asking his father through his blade where to go next, which then causes the wind to blow in a certain direction, telling the player that this is your navigation system, as I have stated before. And shortly after you meet back up with Yuna, the two talk about what exactly had happened on the bridge. Jin still feels guilty for not stopping the Khan, which is understandable. Then some more cheesy ass dialogue plays, insinuating the gameplay mechanic of becoming the ghost. This transitions into a tutorial of environmental stealth that I will touch on later. Jin then talks about different people that can help him on his quest, and of course Yuna just boasts about her brother. I wish she would just shut the fuck up about her brother, but I guess I understand. He's missing, blah blah blah. Jin then gets on the horse that he had picked out previously and rides off, showing the title of the game, which then causes the world to now open up in the game. Since we have the intro to the game out of the way, I want to do something different with this narrative section of the video. Considering this game is an open world RPG type game, it is going to be odd to just go line by line and analyze everything everyone is saying. This is because this game doesn't have a linear mission line. My story structure through the game can be different from what you guys have done. And with that being said, I'm going to start out by explaining the mission structure of what exactly it is the character is doing, and then I'm going to go briefly over the dialogue and what the mission entails and give a critique of said missions afterwards. There will also be times where I just group missions together. And with that being said, we make our way to Yuna again. We have an instance of base clearing of Mongols. You'll find that this is about 95% of the main missions where you either have to clear a base of enemies, you have to defend a base from enemies, or you have to sneak through a base and not get detected. Although this can be fun, the repetitive nature of the mission starts to drag, and at the end of the day, you just want to get to the end of the game because of those reasons. In this specific mission, since it is the beginning of the game, this introduces you to stealth combat. You go through the camp, clear out enemies all stealth-like, and eventually free a captured man that isn't Yuna's brother, in which we thought we were rescuing. This isn't exciting, but the introduction of stealth combat opens up the game in an extremely fun way, which I will get to later in the video. And after getting the blacksmith to safety, he tells us that the last group that went out of the camp was a man that looked a lot like Yuna's brother, Taka. He tells us that he was headed toward a place called Osmo Bay, but right after, Yuna still goes on about her brother, saying that he will forge the tools we need and so forth, but after, brother, they're going to be leaving the island. I do wish that she would have said this after saving her brother. That way there's at least some surprise factor. When I heard this, it caused me to try and forget about Yuna, because not only does her voice sound robotic and not believable, but now it seems like the writing is leaning toward a reversal where Yuna is ultimately going to stay, leaning into the predictability of the game. Now, why does this make me want to forget her? Because her writing is extremely dull and predictable, like I said, and so far there's nothing interesting about her. Why would I care for a character where her only personality trait is her brother? It's boring. Before this, there is another dream sequence after our first stealth kill. It entails Jin chasing a bear, finding out that it's dead, someone tries to kill Shimura dishonorably, and Shimura allowing Jin to execute the bandit and teach him a lesson about being honorable. There isn't a specific problem with this flashback, but the writers keep hammering the fact that being honorable is the only way, and they do this over and over and over again throughout the story. Like, we fucking get it. They do it way too much throughout the game, and it does more damage than good. Not to mention that stealth gameplay is so much fun. Having Shimura lecture Jin about being honorable only makes me want to do more stealth shit just to irritate him. It's a problem because the game wants you to feel bad for doing dishonorable actions, because that is what Jin is thinking. But like I said, the stealth gameplay is so much fun to where you just don't give a shit about what Jin feels. They're going to keep on stealth killing. Like, I commend the gameplay tremendously, but the writing is becoming a problem. And after, we get a cutscene of the Khan talking to Shimura about how he knows that we're still alive. He explains that he knows because his men control the towns and roads and etc. Everyone I have come across so far in the world that are Mongols have been unalived. So how in the hell am I supposed to believe someone knows I'm alive? Especially since most of the stuff I've done has been done stealth-like. This isn't believable. I understand I'm being overcritical, but after playing games like God of War and The Last of Us, games that are huge narratively, it's hard just to ignore these story points. It's whatever, but I also want to point out the aggressive fade to black after cutscenes. What is that all about? It starts to become extremely noticeable and takes you out of the game. It may have to do with loading in assets and shit, since I'm playing on a PS5, the load times aren't miserable, but the fade to blacks are still very noticeable. I always found this a cheap way to transition scenes. It was also taught to me in film production that you need to use them sparingly. It's just something to point out. Next, we make our way to Sensei Ishikawa, the next person we need to recruit to help us break out Shimura. The whole mission deals with finding the sensei, understanding that he was teaching a peasant archery, but was too hard on her, so she ran away. This causes a section of investigating footprints so we can follow them, and it leads us to a Mongol camp. Also along the way, Ishikawa gives us a bow, opening the combat a tad bit more. But before that, before meeting Ishikawa, we see that there was a struggle at the dojo, with blood and arrows everywhere. And I love this setup. It was the detective nature, and I had no idea what was going to come next. Was student killed after running away? Was she captured? Did she willingly go with the Mongols? When we get to the base, the game gives you the option of destructible environments and distractions. This includes beehives, barrels, lanterns, and so forth. And I love these kinds of things in games. Think smarter and not harder mentality. And after drawing out all the enemies and taking them out with those said objects, we investigate what exactly had happened. It turns out that since Ishikawa pushed his student too hard and made her run away, she was ultimately captured by Mongols but won her freedom after showing the skills at her disposal being an archer. This caused her to lead an attack at the dojo. I think that's what happened. I may be wrong. Let me know in the comments below, which explains why the blood is everywhere. And later, after finding a wounded captive, he states what I've explained. He also says that the Mongols gave her armor and a bow, which then caused her to kill his wife. This is becoming really dark and I love it. This was the first mission where I was interested in what was going on. I love the disobedient student turned to vengeful killer type of story, and it does it well. Next on our list of people to get on board to help free Shimura is Lady Masako. This deals with trying to figure out where she went by following footprints and broken arrows. Before then, we must investigate her estate, where we can see a massacre of men lying next to each other. Jin mentions that they aren't bandits or Mongols, so it must be the people that have been residing at the estate, possibly Lady Masako's family. A solid foundation for a good mission. As we follow the trail, we eventually get to Lady Masako as she mistakes us for a bandit and shoots an arrow at her feet. This whole conversation with her is sad. We talk about the death of her husband at the beach and the rest of her clan dead at her estate. There's a plot twist though. Her own people slaughtered the clan. Now, it is our job to go along with her and find some information pertaining to who exactly did the killing. And I love the setup of the mission, but the voice acting behind Lady Masako is just not good. The way she delivers lines seems to be forced in the act of trying to be dramatic, and after telling us her family's dead, she doesn't come off as sad, angry, or anything. I mean, of course you can insinuate she's both, but but the delivery of lines says otherwise. But regardless, we'll pay our respects to her family and travel to a temple because she wants to talk to a certain someone. His name is Sogen, and this dude is hella sketch. You start to understand that Lady Masako more than likely knew that this person was behind the attack on her estate. She came up with a plan for you to talk to him, then it will cause him to get spooked and run off, giving away his position on who he's connected to and where he is residing. And this is exactly what Lady Masako confirms with us. This brings us to a tailing section, and I just hate these. I hate having to wait fucking 30 seconds when Sogen stops and looks around. It is just irritating and not good mission design. In my opinion, it is lazy. I gave Far Cry 3 the benefit of the doubt, but after playing this mission, I realized how unfun it is. Regardless, he leads us to a camp full of people that we take out, and once we interrogate him, he pretty much tells us bullshit about how people in the way of his vision needs to be removed. Lady Masako freaks out and kills the dude because the children were involved with his slaughter. I think it was her children, her family's children, whatever it was. Although this is sad, I had no connection with Lady Masako or the children that were killed. Sure, of course I feel bad, but at the same time I didn't care for Masako. It was just as if she was another NPC in the world. You will find that this is a problem throughout most of the game, excluding Shimura, the Khan, and maybe Taka and Yuna. The rest are just not interesting at all. Afterwards, you come across a burning cart that was occupied by a Mongol soldier. We do some investigating of where this person or people have went after destroying the cart, but this investigating happens for the third mission in a row. Now, I usually don't care about these investigation missions, but when you do it 3 times, it just screams to me that the developers had no other idea how to start the mission. It screams lazy. I mean, I'm no game developer, so why does my voice matter? But it is disappointing to have the same mission start again. And trust me, it happens so many other times throughout the story, and it gets frustratingly tiresome. When we get to the end of the footprints and fight some Mongols, we come across this dude that takes out a Mongol. His name is Ryuzo, and he seems to know Jin way back in the day. And later in the mission, there's discussion between the two about training to be a samurai. I actually think this happens in a later mission, but I think it's important to kind of delve deep into it now. The two had a fight where a bunch of people attended, and Jin whooped his ass, humiliating him. This caused Ryuzo to not become a samurai and to stay a peasant. Later on, though, the Straw Hats, a mercenary group, saw the duel between the two and offered Ryuzo to be one of their swordsmen. It is a tough situation to be in, and I found this conversation working in terms of sympathizing with Ryuzo, but before that, the two battle some Mongols that seemingly come out of nowhere. The two later meet up with the rest of the Straw Hats, and Ryuzo says that there are starving men, that they need food. This causes Jin to come up with a half-assed plan and promises the Straw Hats that he will give them food. Ryuzo says a plan should be made, but should have talked about it with him before announcing it to his men, and it does still seem like the rivalry between the two is still there, and it's an interesting plot point. Later in the mission, it's another base attack stealth sequence that's becoming way too repetitive at this point, but thanks to the combat and stealth mechanics, it's actually pretty fun, but fucking Christ, do the developers have like nothing up their sleeve. This is starting to feel like an Assassin's Creed game, but not in a good way. And to make matters worse, the whole idea of this mission is to find food for the Straw Hats, but you don't find any food in the camp. So there's a plan to go attack some boats and see if there's any food there, but there isn't. It felt like 20 minutes of my life was wasted achieving nothing. It would have been better to just call it a mission after not finding food for the first time, and instead of going after the boats, have the Straw Hats irritated with you because for 1, there wasn't any food, and 2, there was loss of men for nothing to be attained. This will cause Ryuzo to be mad at you as well, which will further increase the tension between the two, as well as giving consequences to Jin's actions. It would have been much more interesting that way, instead of rinse and repeat, trying to find food and getting away with nothing. Anyways, at the end of the mission, we give Ryuzo Mongol battle plans only if he helps us break Shimura out of prison. The funny fucking thing is, I think those plans have to do with getting the food for his men, but don't quote me on that. And if that is true, it is the stupidest thing ever. We went through all of that work only for Ryuzo to get food without us. What a dumpster fire. I am probably being too harsh on this game and on this mission, in all honesty. And if we have a mission where we actually get the food for Ryuzo, it would boost the relationship between the two, putting together trust. But no, instead they wanted to structure it differently so later on Ryuzo can betray us. The game suffers tremendously from building characters around a plot rather than building a plot around the characters. They didn't want you to help Ryuzo's men because if you did, they would be in your debt. And if they are in your debt, then the betrayal wouldn't make sense. Poor writing. Next, we have to meet with Yuna, another dude named Kenji. Kenji's sake seller and has a wacky personality, but I found him more annoying than funny in all honesty. I have no idea if they were trying to go the comedy route with him or that's just him as a whole. Still though, the voice actor was trying to do some crazy voice. For fuck's sake, it's so bad.
I love the kid, but this is too dangerous. It will never work.
Essentially, the whole plan of this mission is to sneak into Osmo Bay through Kenji's cart, find Taka, break him out, and run away, making it another base infiltration mission. It is almost like they forgot there are other mission structures to choose from. It's really repetitive, frustrating at this point, and the worst part about this mission, you have to tail a dude through a heavily guarded base, and if you get caught, it will restart the mission. This type of mission should honestly be a thing of the past. Find another way to push forward the narrative. It's lazy. I'm sorry. Not sorry. When we do eventually get to talk and free him, he gets all freaked out and says that we can't escape or they will kill him. I mean, like, I understand that he's scared, but you were just about to die before we saved you. What makes you think not running away will keep you alive? It's like the riders were just fucking winging it throughout the game, and it's frustrating to see such good combat and stealth be wasted because the narrative is complete ass. As soon as we get out of the camp and meet up with Kenji, nothing really special happens. He just says that they can't meet up at his place because it's crawling with Mongols. I also think this is a good time to comment on the dialogue within gameplay. It's non-existent, really. When there is dialogue in these segments, they're not important at all. It's just fillers, so you don't have to ride or walk in silence next to your allies. And sometimes they'll comment on what the mission entails, but some of the time it's like shit you already know. There's no said character revealing important things about themselves that make you care about them. There's no actual good banter, none of that. Coming off The Last of Us and God of War, I guess I just expected the same here since it's another Sony title, but I was wrong. I guess that's my fault for expecting that. I just wish there was a lot more in the game, but so far the combat world is carrying the game. But after this mission, you have the option to go back to the camp and clear it, which of course I did, because why not? I like to kick some booty. Afterwards is probably the most cringe-ass mission in terms of narrative. We have to meet up with Taka and Yuna at a forge. While we're there, we of course fight some enemies and meet up with Yuna. She says that Taka's hiding while the Mongols are coming back with reinforcements to take out the rest of the village. So now it is up to us to take them out by going to different sections of the town and saving some people. It's not a big deal. There have been worse objectives. Then after that, we have to fire up the forge in order to draw some Mongols to said forge so we can take the rest out. And along the way, we find some NPCs talking about our fighting style, saying that we are brutal and they have never seen someone fight like Jin. So this is cool, right? Having people comment on your combat is rewarding, and not to mention it goes along with the narrative of you becoming the ghost. The cringe part happens when you finally take out the Mongols and the villagers talk about you again. And right after hearing this, Yuna does this entirely cringe speech with no emotion behind it. It's so forced.
I've never seen a samurai fight like that.
It was nothing.
You are more than a samurai. He is a vengeful spirit, back from the grave to slaughter the Mongols.
Where do we hide now?
You don't. Fire up a forge and get back to making strong Komatsu weapons. That's how we fight back. That's how we'll save Lord Shimura. Vengeful spirit?
I think they liked it.
To kind of go over this, Jin's part in the speech was actually not bad. It was endearing. He gave hope for the people to fight back the Mongol invasion, but Yuna's part feels like a speech that a 10-year-old kid would think is cool. I guess that is their target audience, but my point stands. There was no emotion behind her voice. I hate the fact that she is the one that proposed the name of the ghost. It would have been so much more impactful if the people themselves came up with that, don't you think? It would make it seem like a legend, a folktale and shit, but when Yuna literally says that Jin is a vengeful spirit, it takes that satisfaction away. It feels forced rather than having that term get built over time. It is like they needed to fill in a checkbox on when to do a reveal of the ghost, and I was frustrated with this. Yuna has become the worst character of this game. To add more onto this forced narrative of Jin becoming the ghost, there is another scene of the Khan talking to Shimura. He talks about how Jin is straying from the warrior's path, becoming dishonorable. Like, for fuck's sake, can we build the dishonorable narrative in a more natural way? It's so incredibly forced, my god. Not to mention the Khan should have already killed Shimura. Wouldn't that have made things so much more easy to control the island? The samurai would be without a leader, It would be so much harder for someone to request help from the shogun, and you would break Jin's spirits doing so, effectively winning the war over the island. But instead, in order to further the narrative, they keep him alive for the sole reason of letting Jin help him escape. It isn't good. It's like they needed to meet a quota on certain events to happen in the game, and this is no way to make a good story. They have good story points, don't get me wrong, but the way they set up the characters around these plot points is in order to further the story is piss poor. Like I've said before, build the plot around the characters instead of building the characters around the plot. The good part about this mission though is the fact that you get a grapple hook to navigate better. Traversal in this game is great. I'll comment on it later. Shortly after the mission ends, Ryozo is screaming out for us, saying that his men have been captured by the Mongols after they are looking for food that was promised with the letter that we gave to him earlier. Along this journey, Ryozo also mentions that someone from the forge called us the Ghost. Like it hasn't been 5 fucking minutes since the last mission and you want to mention it again? Just wait a little bit to make it more effective rather than tread over the same ground shortly after so you can fuel adolescent teenagers' testosterone levels. Like they're just forcing it so hard. Chill out. Let it build naturally, like I said before. We then meet up with some remaining Straw Hats that haven't been captured. We found out that some people have left. Seems legit since they have been promised food, but instead some of their men have been captured. And afterwards, Ryozo asks his soldiers if anyone else wants to leave. What a good leader. Like, bro, your actions cause people to get captured. I would leave in a heartbeat if he was my leader. When we get to the camp, it is another mission of infiltrating, and you can't be seen. I can already tell this is going to be the Halo critique all over again with how much repetition is happening. It's like the developers' only idea of mission design was this. Like, you do realize you could do so much more in this game besides it. You have a beautiful world that you can use, but you use the missions in this way? Bruh. The weirdest and most interesting part about this mission, though, is the fact that the Straw Hats are singing when they are in the cage, and not to mention later on, Ryozo mentions that these men are well fed and the Mongols didn't hurt them. So, the Mongols are treating them properly? Interesting. I love this because it doubts the player about the Straw Hats. Are the Mongols doing this in hopes of recruiting them? One of the few highlights about this mission. After opening the door for the remaining Straw Hats to enter along with Ryozo, we battled the remaining Mongols. It was a pretty fun battle, not gonna lie. We then talked to Ryozo about his men being well fed. As I have said, I just wish the dialogue was so much better, man. We eventually meet back up with Yuna at the same forge. Jin is surprised that Yuna is still there, considering Jin thought Yuna would jump at the first opportunity of getting out of Tsushima, but she says that she won't leave until her debt is paid after saving Taka. Jin tells Yuna to prepare the others about breaking into Castle Kaneda, finally breaking out Shimura. Another scene plays where we see the Khan talking to Shimura in a cell again. I wish they didn't do this so often. Like, does the Khan like hanging out in the prison with him? It just seems so weird to me. But the whole conversation goes over the fact of Jin's dishonorable fighting style. Again, regardless, the Khan hints to the fact that he wants to take over his ancestral castle. Convenient because Jin is about to break out Shimura. Now, do you see what I mean when I say they are building characters around the plot? There are literally so many coincidences in this game. It was the same criticism I had about The Last of Us Part 2 when I first played it, except here it is much more abundant. The time of day then fast forwards to us breaking into the castle. Jin does the same thing in all the other missions where he just breaks in, not be seen for a certain amount of time, blah, blah, blah. Nothing special. The best part about it is using the grapple hook though. The thing is satisfying to use. After sneaking around for a set amount of time, you eventually meet up with Lady Masako. Then you can finally choose if you want to do a stealth approach or just go full out samurai. I did a combination of both and it was pretty fun. Along the way towards Shimura, you come to find out that the Straw Hats haven't come. This plays into the fact that they may be hired by someone else. You then have the option by responding with "can't blame him" or "Ryuzo failed me." Yeah, he failed me without a doubt. Why is this even a thing to consider? He promised. Why would you ever respond by saying that you can't blame him? What? Because some of his men got captured and he can't risk it again? That doesn't make sense considering he just throws his men at problems that needs fixing, which includes helping him find food at one of the bases, and then after he goes with some men to look at another base for food. There hasn't been a visible instance where Ryuzo clearly tells you that he isn't going to do a job because his men will die. This makes the option of not blaming him stupid. But later on, of course, you could see it from a mile away. Ryuzo got hired by the Khan to kill Jin. The Khan promised him food and money, I suppose, so you fight Ryuzo in a lackluster boss fight, and after you beat him, he alerts everyone of your position and runs away. Damn, can this game just be good narratively for more than a couple seconds? Everything is so predictable. It relies on coincidences, and the characters within the story are mostly one-dimensional. Finally, you get to break out Shimura, but instead of sneaking out, Shimura insists on fighting everyone because he is a samurai and prides himself on honor. And after fighting everyone, Shimura Shimura talks to us again, thanking us on breaking him out and going on an honorable tangent again. The best part about this mission though is after. You get to see a scene where Khotan Khan is telling the people of Shimura's castle to let them inside, and since they aren't, he gives Ryuzo a torch to set people that are tied up on fire. It shows the lengths at which the Khan is willing to go, and I wish they included more scenes like this. It shows the brutality as well as showing Ryuzo's regret of siding with the Khan. He's sad that he's killing his own people of Tsushima just so he can feed his men. It's fucked up, it's horrible, but it makes the player invested. Then after witnessing this, the people of the castle let the Khan inside. We then talk to Shimura about what had just happened. He tells Jin that he has heard about the methods of stealth, fighting dishonorably, and so forth. The cool part about this is Shimura understands why he did it and tells him to not do it again since he is broken out of prison. This is cool because Shimura isn't necessarily disappointed with Jin. He did what he had to do to save the people of Tsushima. But of course, this cool thing ends once you realize that you are going to keep stealthing regardless of what Shimura says. Jin asks about Yuna's freedom to leave the island and Shimura agrees to do so as long as Yuna fights alongside him. This makes me dislike Shimura. You were telling me he's supposed to be honorable but throws lives away? She literally helped you escape. Isn't that enough? Like, what exactly does honor mean to Shimura? It is so convoluted, which brings down the entire narrative and Shimura's way of thinking. And when you talk to Yuna about this, she is of course upset. The mission now starts where you follow Shimura. During the conversation on horseback, you tread the same conversations as the cutscenes. Nothing new is here except some small talk between the two that I couldn't care less about in all honesty. Jin and Shimura eventually come across a burning village caused by the Khan. I love it when they show the brutality of the enemy, and I wish they would do more of it within cutscenes. Shimura explains that this was the cause of him escaping, which makes sense, but my point still stands. The Khan had no reason to keep Shimura alive, so if you think about it, it was all the Khan's fault. Along the mission, you do fucking another base clearing mission. Is this Sucker Punch's game or Ubisoft's game? I seriously can't tell. After clearing the base, Jin talks to Yuna and Shimura. Yuna puts an offer on the table about Yarikawa helping out against the Mongol invasion, but I guess there was some beef between them and Shimura. Apparently there was a rebellion years ago that Shimura had put down. Later in the dialogue, Shimura explains that the people of Yarikawa have no love for him, which prompts Yuna to say that she grew up there. This causes some tension between the two, having Shimura think she's a bad influence on Jin, so to speak. Finally, there is some tension with the story. I don't think there has been an instance of tension besides Jin and Ryuzo, and even then that shit was underwhelming. Soon after, we light the fire in the lighthouse to signal that we have taken over the base. During the scene, Shimura lays out a couple of missions for us. Get our family samurai armor back at our old home, recruit the people of Yarikawa, and talk to someone that can help us deliver a message for reinforcements to the mainland. This brings the start of the Act 2 in the game, and with that, I'm going to clump together the missions I have stated to make things more streamlined. You can do these in any order, so it's not like they are narrative locked in any way. Then I'm going to go over them briefly and talk about what I like and didn't like. First, I want to get Jin's family samurai armor because who doesn't want more armor? This mission has you hanging out with an old woman named Yuriko for a day. You go on a walk, pay your respects to Jin's family, get your old armor, go on another walk with Yuriko, and at the end, Jin does a base infiltration. Again, to get some herbs for Yuriko in order to get some poison. With Yarikawa, you do base infiltration, talk to certain people around the camp, including the leader, infiltrate another base using stealth and combat, find some rogue archers from the village and help them take down some enemies, and at the end, you defend the village, fully embracing the way of the ghost. And before the defense, you spend some time with Yuna. This causes the people of Yarikawa to trust Jin and will help take down the Mongols. After, the Khan talks with Yurizo about Jin, stating to the Khan that he will be the one to take him down. Lastly is finding the person who can deliver the message to the mainland. First, we meet with a woman named Lady Sanjo and ask her where this messenger is. His name's Goro. You then meet with him and tell him about the debt he needs to repay to Shimura, in which he agrees to do so. You then make your way to Lord Shimura, infiltrate another base, defend Goro by using a certain mechanism to take out boats, then talk with Shimura again about what to do next. So now, what is the real reason why I grouped all of these missions together? Because the mission structures are literally the exact same. You talk to someone, infiltrate a base, do something different with the corresponding mission, then talk to someone again. It's like they had a checklist on what mission needs to have. The repetitive nature of this makes it so fucking boring. Like, sure, the combat makes it fun to a certain degree, but you're walking a fine line between, hey, I want to keep doing this, and yeah, everything is becoming stale. Thankfully, the combat doesn't become stale, but there was a risk with the structure of these missions. To add on to this, there were very few interesting things that happened in this mission. For example, getting to spend time with Yuriko was amazing. She's a likable character who loves Jin immensely. She helped to raise the man. And when Jin asks to make poison, she gets worried because he is straying from the samurai path. The reason that I like her stating this instead of Shimura is because she's genuinely worried. Shimura is just a dude reprimanding you and hasn't given you a reason to care other than him in small cutscenes accepting you into his family and training you. Yuriko, on the other hand, while spending time with you, talks about how Jin is like his father, reminiscing about memories, and she looks to be sick. Grouping all of these things together makes you sad for her. She misses Jin, she misses how things used to be, but at the end of the day, since the mission structure is kind of the same as everything else, it does dampen things. And I touched briefly on the other two missions. The one I had the most fun with was defending Yorikawa. Though I hate the narrative of the said mission since it involves Yuna, the combat was amazing. During this, you learn the Ghost Stance, which is a special ability. Essentially, the screen goes black and white, and you can kill up to 3 enemies with one swing of your sword. It is so cool because the enemies become scared of you when you initiate it. Also, you learn how to slaughter an enemy. It is a system where you stealth kill a leader in front of soldiers, which causes them to flee the fight. Badass. Things I don't like about the mission is just the dialogue. They do this speech after driving away the Mongols and is the most cringe shit. It just comes off as fake emotion and not genuine, and it happens all the time in this game. If they would have hired better voice actors besides Jin and possibly Shimura, the game could have been better off. Usually, I don't like when games have a sequence where you are in control of a minigun, rocket launcher, or so forth, because it is a cheap way to make a scene cool, but defending Goro with the missile thing, and I totally forgot what the thing is called, was actually lots of fun. It didn't feel cheap, it felt necessary because tied in with the narrative that has built up within the level, using that thing felt necessary in order to take out the boats. Though, I hate the constant repetition of infiltrating an enemy base. I didn't mind this one because it felt like an all-out battle and not just you going in, but with that being said, it doesn't excuse the rinse and repeat nature of the game. Regardless, still wasn't that bad, though things get bad when the battle gets over with. Shimura talks about wanting to formally adopt Jin as his son. This seems like a heartfelt message, right? It is, sure, but that falls apart when he keeps nagging you on trying to keep honor. You already know that Jin isn't going to stop with his ghost ways, so in the end, you can insinuate that Jin is going to end up betraying Shimura by leaving the samurai way, therefore branding Jin a traitor in the eyes of the shogun. This means he won't end up being his adopted son. The plot is predictable. It causes these heartfelt moments to not carry any weight because you already know what happens in the end. Some of you may disagree strongly, which is totally fine, and I encourage you to comment your own opinion down below. Maybe some of you can change my mind. After these missions, Jin eventually meets up with Shimura at his camp. He tells us that he had intercepted orders from the Khan that were intended for Ryuzo. Shimura tells us that Ryuzo was at a place called Fort Koyasan. Afterwards, Jin meets up with Yun and asks her to help him one last time, even though she intends to leave the island. She declines and causes Jin to go alone. Honestly, I really don't care if she leaves or not. We've taken down a fort in the game countless times by ourselves. I have trouble understanding why Jin needs help with these forts time and time again, when in gameplay you can just breeze by them. I know it's for story purposes, so I'm gonna let it slide, but still. When we do get to the fort and scout it, Taka comes out of nowhere and tells us that he wants to help. After some disagreements, Jin caves in and lets Taka distract some guards in order for him to slip inside the base, causing another base infiltration. Oh my god. Eventually, Jin finds Ryuzo and he tries to turn us over to his side, but Jin declines. It's a pretty straightforward cliche thing that happens, though Jin gets knocked out. How many times does this dude get knocked out? Jin wakes up tied to a post, and in front of him is Taka. Well, we know how this is going to end. The Khan eventually comes out and tries to coax Jin into siding with him, but it doesn't work, and in order to scare Taka and Jin, he makes Taka take our sword and use it to execute us. After telling Taka to run, he instead tries to use it on the Khan, but ultimately meets a gruesome fate. It's a shame because Taka was one of the better characters in the game, specifically because he wasn't annoying. I hate the fact that he tried to take out the Khan, though. They use it to signify that he died with honor. It's just very predictable, and I already had enough with the honor talk in this game since it's almost in every conversation. I just learned to tune it out. This made this scene just a whatever thing. The shitty part about this whole scene, though, is the fact that the Khan just leaves you there. He doesn't kill you, doesn't injure you or torture you, he just leaves. Tell me, why doesn't he just kill you then and there? He would have effectively ended the most dangerous man on the island, but decides not to? Huh? Another case of writing characters around the plot instead of the other way around. At this point, I was just done with the narrative and tuned out. The gameplay and world design are what kept me playing this game 100%. I would just say now, if you have bought this game, how many of you were genuinely impressed with the game narratively? I bet 70% of you kept playing because of how amazing the world and combat is. I highly doubt the story was your highlight of the game. This is one of the worst stories I've ever seen out of a PlayStation exclusive. You could tell they spent the majority of their time perfecting the combat, which is extremely important and great, don't get me wrong, but when your game is a narrative kind of RPG, you at least need a solid story, not a shitstorm. This game constantly runs on cliches and predictable reversals, effectively catching the Ubisoft syndrome. Regardless, Jin escapes. Of course, you grab your armor and sword and fight off some Straw Hats. You then run into Yuna, who was looking for Taka and ultimately saw the fate of her brother. In turn, she wants to take out the remaining people at the fort. I mean, it was sad, sure, but like I said, I tuned out the story when the Khan just up and left. Afterwards, Yuna says that she will help us after burying her brother. She now wants to fight. I mean, I saw this coming, so I mean, whatever. We got back to Shimura's camp and saw that the reinforcements had come. We talked with one of their leaders and he tells us that Shimura is planning to take back his castle. Seems lit. Afterwards, we meet with Yuna and she does another cliche thing where she explains that Jin has stood up for the people when no one else would. The same trope that every sort of media uses when the protagonist is against insurmountable odds. She also says that they are risking their lives for the ghost. I wish I could count how many times she's said that word. It's actually ridiculous. At this point, I'm starting to feel bad about shitting on this game so much, so I'm gonna try to stop. I'll just end up repeating myself if I just keep going. When we meet up with Shimura, we tell him the whole story about how we were captured and how Taka has been unalived. We explain that he died with honor, which is weird for Jin to say since he's been dishonorable the entire time. Maybe it's to make Shimura proud, or reverse his way of thinking on Yuna and her people. I have no idea. Regardless, Shimura explains that the Shogun has supported the decision on adopting Jin. It was a feel-good conversation, I'm not gonna lie. The scene fades to black, and we make our way to the castle, battling everyone in our way, then initiating once again, another base infiltration mission. You go in, defeat more enemies, then eventually it comes to a stalemate. Jin then poisons an enemy and hops down to slaughter the captain when he is distracted. Right when this happens, Shimura opens the gate and witnesses Jin's slaughter and reprimands him. Shut the fuck up. Shimura is just becoming annoying. I'll try to stop. I'm sorry. The scene would have been much more impactful if they didn't talk about honor 24/7. After taking out one of those missile things and fighting more, the Mongol forces started retreating into the castle. You then get to see the lengths at which the Mongols are willing to go in order for the samurai not to regain control. They attach horses to explosive barrels and take out the bridge. Now, this is what I like. Not the horses dying. Not that, but the brutality. Where was this the entire game? We've only seen this a couple of times through it, where they burn villages and when Ryuzo burns an innocent to death, that was it. We need more of this. We need more consequences. After seeing this, Shimura wants to rebuild the bridge and charge again, essentially just throwing away lives at this point. Jin says that there's another way to take out the base, pretty much sneak in, poison the enemy, take out Ryuzo, and be done. But again, the mission structure is the same, and I'm so tired of it. Before this though, Yuna gives a different armor set, the ghost armor. I will say that this armor, to me at least, is the best looking armor in the game and I won't change it out. It's just too clean. After taking out everyone in the base stealth-like, Jin faces down Ryuzo, who insists on not fighting. Instead, he wants Jin to side with him and they could take down the Khan and everyone else. No. You have killed innocent people, turn on us when there was absolutely no reason to, considering Shimura would have likely given your people food if you'd helped. Thankfully, Jin recognizes this, so I don't have to criticize this scene. This boss fight was easy, and I feel like I must talk about them super quick. They aren't boss fights. They're more like standoffs. Attacks are super easy to parry, dodge, and so forth. Just like fighting a real enemy, except they have more health and the camera angle is a bit different. Super disappointing in my eyes. After the fight, you just say goodbye to Ryuzo and unalive him. It was so anticlimactic and not emotional at all. When Jin makes it back outside, we find Yuna there, but no words are exchanged. You just see the poison enemies on the ground, and I gotta admit, this was pretty cinematic. Shimura and his samurai army come strolling in and just reprimands us again, stating that we are acting like the enemy. Shimura says that the Shogun will want to head for the wrongdoing. The problem with this whole scene though is that it happens way too fast. From the beginning of Act 2 till now, it's just wow. 1 minute this dude is incredibly happy to fight alongside us, and then the next he's like, yeah, you are now a dead man unless you blame it on someone else. Like, what the fuck? To top it all off, when he says to blame it on someone else, isn't that dishonorable as well? I'm not sure if they're trying to pin Shimura as a dishonorable in his own way or they're doing something else, but I am confused. Eventually, Jin says that Shimura isn't his father and he just doesn't want to be adopted anymore. I would say the same at this point. Jin gives his sword to Yuna, tells her to walk away, and after Jin goes to jail. I'm starting to realize that the pacing in this game is a huge issue. The whole thing of Shimura witnessing the dishonorable nature of Jin solely in Act 2 was a mistake. They needed to spread it out at least to the middle of Act 3. Though we get broken out of prison right away by the hands of Kenji, he says that Yuna is with our sword and armor tracking the Khan up north. So, after finding this out, we stealth our way through the camp, and keep in mind, you can't get caught or else the mission will end. You'll find your horse and ride off. Also, your horse gets taken out eventually, which sucks, but I didn't feel attached to this horse since I mostly fast traveled to places. If you want the player to get attached, get rid of most fast travel places and go the Red Dead route, where you have a bond level with your horse, and when it increases, the dialogue with your horse changes, but no, this game doesn't do that, sadly. Kicking off Act 3, after our horse unfortunately goes down, Jin now has to go on foot and navigate through another place full of enemies without being detected. And this time, like the last mission breaking out of the prison, you can't take down anyone. This is a Ubisoft game, no question. I'm not about to argue with any of you guys. We eventually see unalived villagers that don't have any injuries on the body, which indicates that the Khan has used Jin's poison to his advantage. Now this is what I call story progression. Finally, Jin's actions have consequences that feel genuine. There is now risk involved with the shit. I mean, yeah, the Khan is a risk for sure, but having Jin's poison recipe is the icing on the cake. Thank God some good can come out of the story. As we make our way out of the camp, we get shot with a poison arrow and get knocked out. Fuck! We then wake up next to Yuna, who somehow found us. Also, I must point out what happened when Jin got poisoned though. Why didn't the Mongols just chase after him there and kill him on the spot when they had the chance? I guess they thought he would die from the poison, but why not make sure? Jin has had plot armor this entire game, and this time that term isn't a joke. I don't use this term often, but the story is downright pathetic from Sony standards. If this was a third-party game, I'd give it more leniency, but since Sony prides themselves all of the time on their stories, having this one be told is embarrassing. Though I will say a positive is that this game has the best world in combat from a Sony exclusive I have ever seen, so at least this game has some serious upsides. Regardless, we get our armor and weapons and go on our way. We get to a watchtower to overlook our next mission to see what we must do. We find a temple that is in attack distance of the Khan's location. After finding this out, Yuna and Jin get on their horses and make their way towards the temple. Now in this mission, at least it's a tad bit different from the environment around us, so it wasn't too bad. Also, you get to finally take out some people as opposed to the previous missions. You take over an outpost area, overlook the main temple, draw out the Mongols onto the ice, and take them out using some explosive barrels, which breaks the ice. Pretty fun stuff if you ask me. So these missions in Act 3 are mostly the same besides one. So going briefly through them, you help some archery dudes that are close to Yuna, attack a fort, and free some of their men. After the mission, you come to find out that these men are people that Yuna used to run with as thieves. This whole mission was decent, I guess, though there were no story moments that are important, only that you recruit these people to bring down the Khan. The next mission, you go with Yuna to scout out the base that you will eventually infiltrate to take out the Khan. Keep in mind you can get spotted, so that makes this mission worse just from that. You then find out that they are shipping supplies of poison that Jim uses in order for them to use it on the mainland of Japan. So at least the stakes are now raised because of that. The two hatch a plan where Yuna will get some fighters in Mongol weapons to take out the boats, while Jin, of course, gets onto the base with a small fighting force to take down the Khan. The next mission is a tad bit different. It's to infiltrate Shimura's castle and plant a note to tell him where the Khan is, and that Jin wishes for him to be there to help him take down the Khan. This mission, you can't take out anyone, can't get caught, and so forth. It's sucky, but so far, every single mission, you have to go into a base. I thought it would be different in the end, but no. But telling Yuna about our mission makes her worry and tells us not to go, but Jin says he must do this, so he goes. There's a flashback though of Shimura talking to Jin about him running away because Ryuzo said that as soon as Shimura had a son, Jin would be replaced. See, why put this here? I mean, I guess to make it clear that Shimura cares about Jin, but besides that, why mention Ryuzo? He has no emotional connection anymore. Maybe it's just me. Still, like, why? Regardless, the flashback ends and we infiltrate the base throughout and go on a sneaky adventure. We hear Shimura talking about Jin, disappointed. That part makes sense considering Jin became dishonorable. I like these little instances because I still wanted to learn more about Shimura. It's a shame that his whole personality is based around Jin and honor rather than himself. We don't get a glimpse of his family through the game. What happened to his previous wife? Did he even have a wife, children? What were his past battles? How did he become leader of Tsushima? None of this was answered at all. it's just a shame. But I do commend the game for at least giving some insight on his feelings to Jin during this whole level. Jin makes it out unharmed and goes on his way back to Yuna. You do see Shimura read this though, but you don't see his reaction besides him yelling for the guards to find Jin. But that's it. Are you kidding me, dude? Finally, it is time to face the Khan. You spend some time with your allies by saying some kind words, meet with Sensei, Lady Masako, Yuna, and the others, but when the time comes, you storm the base to take the Khan down, and I must admit, this was the most fun mission in the game, even though it was literally the same as any other. Maybe it's because we're close to the end, the stakes are high, people are fighting alongside you, whatever it is. It felt more impactful this time around, but later on in the mission, we see that Shimura came through with his army, and that's a good thing. Ultimately, you do fight the Khan. It was a pretty cool standoff scene where the Khan is like talking to himself, looking around, knowing Jin is somewhere nearby. Then Jin just appears out of nowhere to fight him. You beat him in the standoff, but he throws something at you, and I have no idea what it is. Then he runs off to his boat like a coward. Oh, okay. You then fight him on the boat, take him down in a badass way, and leave the boat. It was a cool fight, and I was pretty satisfied to say the least. Yuna finds your mask on the ice for some reason, and I have a question. How did it end up there? Didn't Jin have it on the whole time, or did I miss something? I mean, it's something extremely little to touch on, but I thought I should mention it. Regardless, Jin walks up to Yuna tired and injured and almost collapses. I mean, I'd imagine this dude is exhausted. He hasn't slept much in this game. Yuna then tells us that Lord Shimura has summoned us to meet him. Interesting. But before that, Yuna says that the ghost belongs to everyone. This would have been touching, but she mentions it like all the time, so that meaning is like taken away. When we meet with Shimura, he tells us that the Shogun has disbanded our clan and labeled us a traitor, which means, of course, the Shogun told Shimura to kill us as punishment for looking over us. Great. Before battling with him, you do some menial tasks like helping some dude who's going to help the ghost, ride with Shimura thinking on the past, and eventually you write your last haiku and then battle. The battle is pretty easy, except there is some unimportant banter between the two. When you defeat Shimura, you then have the option to spare or kill him. Yeah, I spared him. I'm not about to all of a sudden become honorable just because Shimura told me to. Plus, Shimura doesn't necessarily deserve to die. He's just twisted by his loyalty to honor. I mean, if he did everything the same as us, the Shogun would have told us to kill him, and I doubt he would kill us because he loves us so much. So, I don't know. Kind of thinking deeply on this. It just doesn't make sense to kill him, in my opinion, but I still respect the option. Some people love the story, I guess, and killing him would make sense to them. It just depends on the person, though this does open up the possibility of a sequel later on, and I hope they do it right. After the credits, you get sent to a little shack where Jin resides, effectively ending the game and opening up the world for side quests and world exploration. So now this seems like a good time to transition to other parts of the game. By far the most interesting thing about this game is combat. Arguably the best combat I have ever laid my hands on. The parries, evades, blocks, and attacks feel so fluid. Making this statement feels cliche, but you really do feel like a samurai or stealthy ninja. And to go over the combat, let's delve into certain things you can do. Aside from obvious slicing and dicing, stealth is a huge part of this game. There's environmental stealth here. You can hide in tall stacks of grass to hide from enemies. There are tents that you can hide in after taking out an enemy inside. You have distractions you can throw to either scoot an enemy towards you or farther from you so you can evade. This does sound like Assassin's Creed, but I consider that a good thing in my opinion. Assassin's Creed, the older games I mean, is king of stealth, so taking a page out of their book was a good option. When taking out enemies stealthy like, the animations are gruesome and perfect. It feels like Jin is literally taking his anger out on the Mongols and fully becoming dishonorable. The story does this poorly, but the combat depicts this amazingly. To add on to this, there's also taking multiple people out, up to 3 I believe. The animations for this are insane. When you do this, it just feels like you're so overpowered in a good way. I also like how they gated this using skill points. You must work towards this ability, giving an incentive to take down camps, do side missions, and so forth. Going more into depth into stealth takedowns, you can also do it from heights, essentially Assassin's Creed but in Japan. But instead of a hidden blade, Jin does this using his katana, and it is so satisfying. If you by chance don't get alerted while being stealth, taking down a camp, you just feel accomplished. Through the skills menu, you also have different tools at your disposal that you can unlock, such as wind chime for distraction, protection, smoke bombs for evasion, sticky bombs, kunais to stun enemies, and the blow dart and bow to take out people from distance. This game has everything for you in stealth gameplay. You have every tool you need, which causes a sandbox type game. You can roleplay and do whatever you so please in the world. Transitioning back to your standard combat, you have different abilities as well. You can upgrade different stances against shield enemies, brutes, swordsmen, spearmen, and so forth. You can upgrade stuff to where you can parry unparryable strikes. You can upgrade your evade. You can upgrade fucking everything, but you do have to choose what you want to main. Do you want to be solely a stealth player, a slice and dice player? It's up to you. And speaking on stances, I love this system. It makes the player think and stay on their toes. Even some stances have no effect on certain enemies. For example, I think using the spear stance against shield enemies just doesn't work. And if I'm wrong, just please let me know. And going further into the story, you unlock the ghost stance, as I have said earlier. This causes you to scare enemies and one slice take down Mongols. It's pretty sick and easy to fill if you take out enemies without being hit, a rewarding thing on higher difficulties. And one of the cooler things in the game is standoffs. This is when Jin calls out to usually the strongest enemy in the area, hold R2 until you see the enemy is about to attack, and then it's a one-hit takedown. And if you upgrade it further, I think you could do it up to 3 enemies in one go. Though not as fun as stealth to me, I do see the appeal to this. If you want to do a Soul Samurai playthrough, you are more than welcome to do so. The final thing to touch on in combat would be horseback combat. Now, this is the weakest part of combat. You only have like 2 animations of swinging your sword on each side. Thankfully, there's only a couple parts of the game where this is a necessity, so I'm going to not spend so much time on this. Regardless, just fight on foot and you will have a good time. To summarize, the combat in this game is masterpiece in and of itself. It is the most satisfying thing ever, and you can clearly tell this was the priority number 1 of the game. It was the saving grace for me, and it was what kept me playing for hours. There were even times where I just didn't want to do the story, so instead I just dicked around and fought some enemies. Endless hours of enjoyment at your disposal. To start off with the world, it is absolutely beautiful. With the colorful flowers, amazing weather changes, awesome architecture, and the awesome traversal system, what is not to love here? By far the best thing is the traversal. Usually in games you have a mini-map somewhere on screen to help you navigate, or a compass of sorts. In this game, to minimize the UI to absolutely nothing, you have the wind to guide you, which was an excellent choice. You just slide up the touchpad and it will show you the direction you have set in the map on your marker. It is something so minor that make a huge difference. You don't have to constantly look at the top of your screen to see where to go next. Pay attention to the wind and use the rest of your time to take in the surroundings. One of the cooler features that I've used most of the time in the game was the whistle flute thing. I don't know the Japanese term for it. Essentially, when you use it, it changes the weather. It is such a minor feature, but say it's raining with thunder and you don't like the color palette that goes along with it. You want something more breathtaking. So no worries, just swipe left on the touchpad and the sun will come out, making the world beautiful again. Some of the bigger features are the foxes and birds. A smoke that you can see in the distance. Finding a fox will result in the animal leading you to a shrine. The shrine will unlock a charm slot or progression towards an extra charm slot. These charms will give you certain buffs in regards to health, damage, healing, and so forth. These are game changers around the world, and most of the time you'll just bump into these creatures. This also goes for yellow birds. These birds will lead you to certain shrines and objects around the world that can help you on your adventures. One time a bird led me towards a katana stuck in a tree. I picked it up and it just gave me the katana. These birds will also lead you towards a mini game where you can press a certain amount of buttons in a certain amount of time, which will then cause Jin to slice some bamboo. If you complete this, it will reward you with the extra resolve or progression towards extra resolve. I love this because there isn't any markers on your map for it. You actually have to explore. And when you just casually run into these fuckers, you will just follow them because you know they'll lead you to something good. If your system is built around the environment and you can just casually bump into them without specifically looking for them, you know your world design is top notch. This brings me towards smoke that you can see in the distance. If you make your way towards them, you'll either run into an NPC that has a side quest, maybe some enemy Mongols that are guarding some supplies, and so forth. So seeing this in the distance makes you want to say, what's over there? Let's check it out. The world is so rewarding toward the player. And branching out a little bit, there's also supplies scattered around the world. The more supplies you get, the more of a chance you have at upgrading your armor for extra benefits, upgrading your katana or tanto for extra damage and assassination speed, or your bow for better damage and range and draw speed. Though this system is bare bones, I love it. Things don't need to to be overly complicated when it comes to currency in the game. If you just have something like this, it will keep the player engaged and will have them actively looking for activities to be able to afford these upgrades. And speaking of upgrades, let's talk about the armor in the game. The armor that you can find that's given to you and so forth is amazing. They can give you different benefits on certain play styles, which is a system that was smart. And for example, I got an armor set dedicated towards archery. For this one, you talk to a dude sitting down who tells tales of Tsushima. After hearing this, you have a certain number of objectives that you need to achieve, and upon completing, you can get the armor. And getting the armor is just so rewarding. Although I never switched out the ghost armor because it just benefits my playstyle best, you have so many options out in the world for you to find if you want to play in a different playstyle. And when you upgrade them, those benefits increase. With that, the armor will change in its appearance. But say, hey, I like how the armor looked before the upgrade. Well, don't worry, you can change that armor back to what it once was without sacrificing the upgrades. Just go to the armor menu and you can change with the button press. It's perfect. Going more into the world scattered, you will find enemy bases that need to be cleared. And yes, I know I ripped on the game for solely basing their mission structure on this, but I stand by that. You shouldn't do this with your narrative, but I think it is more than okay to include it when it comes to side activities. Doing them on your own time is fun. When you need supplies, hit a base and loot the shit out of it. You want to have mindless fun, hit a base and clear it. If you want to roleplay, sick, hit a base and clear it. Having it included within the world is fun. It gives you something to do. The problem arises when you include it in your narrative and have it become repetitive. To summarize, the world is full of shit to do. Do what you want to do in it and you will have loads of fun. I have always praised Assassin's Creed for its world design. It's fun as hell, pretty, and rewarding. And the same applies here, except more so. It causes replayability, and that is a huge plus for the game. When it comes to side quests, there are a lot in the world, and I mean a lot. Enough to have you playing for 20 plus hours after the game ends or during your story run. You can encounter these while you're doing your travels, but also there will be some markers. For example, side quests that help out the warrior monk, Lady Masako, the sensei, and so forth. These are your longer tales that progress like a storyline. Others, for instance, like talking to the musicians across the island, span only a handful of objectives through one mission. These were my favorites, not only because they were quick and fun, but also because you gain abilities that go along with it, and I'll give a few mission examples. One of my favorites was getting the Fireblade ability. To complete this objective, you meet with the musician, climb a cold mountain, and in order to climb this mountain without dying, you need to sit around campfires to warm up. And as you progress and finally make it to the top, you will battle a samurai who then teaches you the special ability. Now, let me tell you, this ability is OP. The attack is unblockable, which is why I love the mission so much. Not only was it fun and different, you get something out of it. Another mission like this is learning the way of the Heavenly Strike. You investigate different areas, talk to certain NPCs, and then meet with this dude at some cool battle arena of sorts, and after fighting him, you learn the way of the Heavenly Strike and use it against him. Once again, this ability is unblockable. Doing these missions on higher difficulties is almost a must because of the shit you gain out of it. I love how they made this entirely optional. It adds to the exploration aspect of the game, as well as incentivizing people to actually do side missions. There are some side missions that you can just encounter doing God knows what. I was on the way to one of Lady Masako's missions and saw this bandit that killed all of his other bandit friends because they took out his entire family. And after finding this out, you help him clear out an entire base, and after taking down the leader, he ends up dying from his wounds and you bury him. The mission wasn't full of narrative, but it didn't have to. You still feel sorry for the dude. He knew he chose the wrong life because of the consequences that occurred. He wanted to right his wrongs and avenge his family. Helping him with that felt like helping him forgive himself. It was touching in its own way. Going into the main side quests, these were okay narratively, I guess. The big upside is that you don't have to infiltrate bases as much. For example, I completed the Masako missions, and keep in mind you can do these in any order. In one mission, you find a dead family and follow some tracks to see who had done it, and Masako takes him out. Next, you take out a base, and Masako tells you that one of her workers was talking to some straw hats. You hide in some tall grass, take out the straw hats, talk to the girl who was about to sell Masako's belongings, and later find out that this woman was having an affair with Lady Masako, and that they both love each other. Because of this, Masako lets her go. And next, you tail some more enemies, find their base, and take them all out, and after taking them out, you find a wife of someone Masako knows. The two decide to interrogate her, I guess. The next mission is pretty much finding out what this woman knows, and she gets killed, and we find the tracker who did it, and he states that he never meant to kill the woman. He then dies from his wounds because the Mongols had fought him. He was trying to help her escape. Masako gets mad, and it's cringe because she didn't want him to die. The killer ends up being the assassin's brother who murdered Masako's family, and we find out his location, and Masako just kills him suddenly out of nowhere. We don't even get to see it. So this is just one of many instances, but do you see what I'm talking about here? Like, sure, there were some interesting parts mixed in, like finding out Masako had an affair, that we interrogated died because she was too scared, but the dude wanted to just free her and accidentally killed her. But like everything else was not interesting. And when things do get interesting, they do the bare minimum at the very end. Like we only heard about 2 full sentences from the killer that took out Masako's family. That's it. Why did he do what he did? What drove him? What caused him to hate Masako so much? You don't find any of this out. And if there is dialogue stating it, it was very little, to the point where I can't even remember it. With the other mission of tailing people and finding out everything, there is stuff revealed there about why they did what they did, but they did very little with the actual main culprit. I'm not saying every side mission's like this. If I went through every single one of this in this video, it would take forever, but the majority of the main side quests are mostly underwhelming, and I only did them to get more skill points. By far the most entertaining side quests were the ones that didn't take themselves too seriously, and only took one mission to accomplish in its narrative. The side missions aren't bad by any means, some are better than others. I just wish most of them did more. I think I enjoyed the musician side quest more than anything else. Overall, narratively, this game was a travesty. I've never seen a worse story come out of Sony Studios. The conclusion that I've come to, as I have stated previously, is that this game suffers from the Ubisoft syndrome. Now, what is the Ubisoft syndrome? This happens if you check off 2 of these 4 boxes, and some of them are more severe than others. 1, excessive amount of base clearing missions in order to progress the narrative. 2, more than necessary tailing missions. 3, bloated open world. And 4, a really bad UI. And Ghost of Tsushima suffers from number 1 and 2. The base clearing missions and more than necessary tailing missions. This, included with the bad narrative, made this game a drag to play through when trying to be engaged with the story. The plot twists are cliche, and for example, Ryuzo turning on you, Taka dying, Yuna not leaving the island, and Shimura shunning Jin for being dishonorable. This is way too many for a narrative to be good. And not to mention the plot holes. 1, why didn't the Khan take out Jin when he was tied up after killing Taka? If he killed Taka, why didn't he just kill Jin? Jin is the most dangerous man on the island by that point. 1, the actual fuck was the benefit in keeping him alive. 2, when Jin got poisoned by an arrow at the beginning of Act 3, why didn't the Mongols run after him to finish the job? 3, at the beginning of the game, why didn't the Khan just kill Shimura when capturing him? He already mentioned that he knows which villages to burn, which to save, already knows their language and traditions, and so forth. There was absolutely no reason to keep him alive, and you can't convince me otherwise. Not to mention he had plenty of chance to do so when Shimura was in prison. And 4, and I just thought of this now, why didn't the Mongols just ship the poison on boats sooner? Why did they have to wait for the Khan? Couldn't they just have shipped a bunch of them with a man in second command on the boat with the poison? If the Khan absolutely needed to be with them, why not just ship the boats in segments, and on the last one have the Khan be on it? There are clear oversights in the game that just make narrative a slog to go through. Not to mention Jin has actual plot armor that harms the fucking narrative. I rolled my eyes countless times, and not to mention the constant fucking blackouts that Jin has. It's just an easy cop-out to transition scenes and or get Jin in a vulnerable position. If you really think this story is good and impressive, that is your own opinion, but you must recognize the flaws. If you don't, I really don't know what to say to you. The good parts are the world and combat and some side quests. The world is beautiful and rewarding. The combat's fluid, easy to control, and rewarding as hell. You will constantly always want to fight people in this game. The side quests are kind of iffy at times, but a lot of them are rewarding and manageable. Very much so the magician's side quest. Those are fucking awesome, mashed with the abilities you get. So without further ado, let's go over the rankings. Last is not even close. This means the game is nowhere near a masterpiece and it has a lot of work to do, and mostly nothing about it was satisfying. Next is it has potential. This means the game has severe flaws, but also some amazing positives. positives. Possibly a DLC or huge patches can make this game better. Second highest is amazing. This is when the game is really good but needs some improvements here and there in order to become a masterpiece. This can be bug fixes, dialogue changes, and so forth. The best is masterpiece. This is when a game has minimal flaws and seals itself as one of the greats and a Hall of Fame game. So, what is this game? It has potential. Look, this game isn't horrible. Yes, it has some serious flaws, but the highs that this game has are really good, specifically the combat and world. And as I have stated, this is the best combat system that I have ever laid my hands on. Before you like Dark Souls, Dishonored, Dick Riders come out at me, no, I haven't played those series, so I can't really say anything about their combat. For me at least, I'm a narrative guy. I play games specifically for that, and when your game doesn't deliver, I'm gonna bash you hard for it. I'm not gonna go easy on you. And when it comes to Ghost of Tsushima, this was the worst narrative I have played from a PlayStation exclusive. And I bet some of you Xbox fanboys are cheering right now. Now I know this is gonna be a divisive analysis because some people swear by this game, so if I offended you, I guess I'm sorry. Leave your opinion down below in the comments and maybe I'll change my mind. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, follow my Twitch, and go look at my socials. They're linked in the description below. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll see you guys in the next one. See you later.